Welcome, Left Reckoning patrons. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom. Hey, David.
How's it going?
And today we are joined by writer and researcher Natalie Shure. She focuses on health, history, and politics. She's a columnist at the New Republic. You've also seen her work on Adam Ruins Everything, which is an amazing breath of fresh air. That show really surprised me. I didn't know you worked on it, and my girlfriend and I watched it. That is a good TV show. And also Jacobin, which we'll get to in Nation and various other places. Natalie, welcome to Left Reckoning.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Let's focus on your most recent piece in Jacobin, which is titled this, and I'll bring it up for people so they can see. It's no mistake that Bill Gates was palling around with Jeffrey Epstein by Natalie Shure. And here is Bill Gates himself asked when he says it is a mistake.
Had several dinners with him, hoping that what he said about getting billions of philanthropy for global health.
I like that little chuckle there, billions. Like it's like his hand was in the cookie jar a little bit. And there's also an implication well, if you were able to get those billions, would it have been okay to have been palling around with him?
He said about getting billions of philanthropy for global health through contacts that he had might emerge. When it looked like that wasn't a real thing, that relationship ended. But it was a huge mistake to spend time with him, to give him the credibility of, being there. There were lots of others in that same situation, but I made a mistake.
Now, Natalie, those lots of others in that situation, I think we can call those philanthropists. Isn't that sort of what your piece argues? And maybe this points to a larger structural issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the others he was talking about are probably either philanthropists or aspiring grantees, people who want philanthropic money. And one of the points that I tried to make is that, a lot of programs that we would consider good and necessary in a lot of cases do rely on philanthropic funding. I think that's a problem. But the idea that there were two billionaires hobnobbing over the course of many years, making mutual contacts with one another. Gates said that it didn't materialize, but other reporting has suggested that there were indeed connections made between the two. Gates certainly made a donation to the MIT Media Lab, Epstein's project after that. So, the fact that this was happening was hardly an accident. It is the whole point. It is, how they accrue resources for their philanthropic projects, making connections with other important, influential, rich people to further those projects. It's hardly a mistake. These aren't two people who, brushed elbows at a water cooler one time at a party. Their goals were very much aligned and they were doing the same things. And this was a very conscious decision on both of their parts.
Yeah, I want to keep an eye on kind of both levels of this, what it says about philanthropy and what it says about Gates himself. I'm just going to read from the New York Times article from October 2019. This is from, I forget what it's called here, but here's from the middle of it. I actually read it. Bill Gates met with Jeffrey Epstein many times despite his past. And it has this section on the first occasion, because you hear Bill Gates say, I met him for dinner. It's like they went out and, they were just, got reservations someplace. But here's the first meeting. Wait a second. Oh, Mr. Epstein and Mr. Gates first met face-to-face on the evening of January 31st, 2011 at Mr. Epstein's townhouse on the Upper East Side. They were joined by Dr. Eva Anderson Dubin, a former Miss Sweden who Mr. Epstein had once dated, and her 15-year-old daughter. Dr. Anderson Dubin's husband, the hedge fund billionaire Glenn Dubin, was a friend and business associate of Mr. Epstein's. And there's a whole bunch of stuff with the Dubins, who are also big time philanthropists in the Manhattan area. So the gathering started at 8 and lasted several hours, according to Mrs. Arnold, Mr. Gates' spokeswoman. Mr. Epstein subsequently boasted about meeting in emails and friends associates. Bill's great. He said, there's another part I just want to include. Bridget Arnold, a spokeswoman for Mr. Gates, said he was, okay, so here's a quote about that Bill emailed somebody after the meeting. His lifestyle is very different and kind of intriguing, although it would not work for me, Mr. Gates emailed colleagues in 2011 at his first get-together, after his first get-together with Mr. Epstein. Bridget Arnold, a spokeswoman for Mr. Gates, said he was referring only to the unique decor of the Epstein residence. and Epstein's habit of spontaneously bringing acquaintances in to meet Gates. That's it. Yeah. So that's like a little bit more than just like we had a reservation made by my, assistant, and I thought I could get some money out of him. But I've talked a little bit. But what else should we know about, I guess, either philanthropy or Bill Gates, Natalie?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically billionaires do philanthropy for the same reason that in years past, or even I guess years present in certain countries, monarchs bestow things unto the masses, or even why machine politicians did the same things, throwing parades, donating to recreation halls, things along those lines. Basically to shore up support. And I think that they really relish the sense of magnanimity that they get from that kind of thing. I mean, obviously, there is a lot about it that's just completely cynical, self-serving, and craven. I think that we can't look past that. A lot of these people get massive tax write-offs. It does get them into the door with other business executives, heads of state. I mean, I don't think that there's anyone on earth who would not answer Bill Gates' phone call. And that was true about Epstein for way too many people for way too long too, right? So I get into the piece in that as well. But so I don't think that we can look past how self-serving it is. But I also think that there is a part of them that really, gets a massive ego boost out of being a good and powerful, influential person. It's not enough to just have more money than any person on earth should, more money than many of the countries that the Gates Foundation serves, but also to, frame oneself as a good person and get that sort of validation and have people adore and admire you. I mean, I think that, for this group of people, there's a whole lot going on. And so, yeah, again, the idea that he cultivated a very long-term friendship with another billionaire who had a philanthropy of its own certainly seems like a feature, not a bug to me.
The tax deductible nature of this is just the extra kicker, because it's one thing that we have such an unequal society where some guy who like you like nod to that, he essentially has all this wealth because he was had the best IP lawyers in the 90s to consolidate a monopoly, like, and he is able not only to do his stuff with we can't avoid him in any of these contexts, right? We're going to be talking about vaccines in a little bit. He's all over that. He just decided or failed. He's fresh off a failure to redo our education system that like the Rand Foundation said, like, this was a complete disaster. You wasted all this money. Like, and he was able to do that because he was a monopolist. And it's one thing that they have that monopoly, but it's another that when they act like they're giving it away, they're actually getting tax deductions on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. No one on earth has benefited more from stringent IP laws than Bill Gates, right? And that's so relevant when it comes to global health, which is obviously his area of specialty, or his foundation's area of specialty. The fact that all of these necessary medicines are so unaffordable in so many countries has all to do with IP. And so, the Gates Foundation, and I do think it's important to grapple with the fact that a lot of the work that it does in given countries within the, power context in which it happens, like a lot of individual patients benefit from that work. But any solution that addressed the root of the problem would involve people like Bill Gates having far less money, right? So, it's a little bit of, arsonists putting out the fire.
Right. Well, no, and I wanted to, you make a point in the piece too that I think is important, about how it's not lost on you that so much of his philanthropic work is focused on so-called diseases of poverty, right? Could you talk about that a little bit? And I also just want to throw in there too, as y'all are both alluding to, like, there's the money side of it, and then there's the power side of it too, right? If like you're the person who's controlling the resources that are going to poor countries that need this kind of help, right? You can sort of flex your muscle to say, okay, well, we want you to have this kind of relationship with IP laws and things like that could benefit him.
Yeah. So yeah, the Gates Foundation primarily works with HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis, the most common diseases of poverty. And so I've done the most research on tuberculosis years ago. That's actually what I wrote my master's thesis on, drug-resistant tuberculosis in the former Soviet Union. So I can speak the most about that. Tuberculosis has been curable for about 70 years. It is, if you have a standard case of it, it's treatable with a pretty straightforward course of antibiotics. If someone is able to manage their disease correctly, and that's difficult because a lot of the people who get this are very poor, so they have difficult housing situations, they're food insecure, sometimes they're migrant workers. And so, actually being in a position to take medication consistently for a period of several months, several weeks or months it's a lot easier said than done, right? And so more resistant strains of the illness develop. And then, in order to treat it, not only do you need very expensive medicines, but you need caseworkers, public health infrastructure, social supports, that kind of thing. And so obviously you can see very closely how a lot of these things would relate very closely to poverty, and the fact that lower income countries, middle income countries are the ones who have the most difficulty. The former Soviet Union in itself has such high levels of drug-resistant tuberculosis because, during the fall of the Soviet Union, or right after the fall of the Soviet Union, when there was all this, shock therapy, basically the neoliberalization of the market, and so many people were just completely ruined. A few people who had power in the party already, a few entrepreneurs got magnanimously rich, while a lot of people, suffered high rates of alcoholism, violence, public health systems collapsed, things like that. And so then it became very difficult to manage this explosion of cases. That was also, HIV was also on the rise, and TB is an opportunistic infection. So people whose immunity systems were already damaged by HIV were more likely to get TB, and so on. And so those things are very, very material, right? There's a reason that tuberculosis is present at such high rates in certain parts of the world and not others. And there's, a reason that drug companies are, basically able to sell the few doses that they have of second line drugs that are necessary, that they can sell to, states or philanthropic organizations for basically as much as they say that they want, even though in a lot of cases they were publicly funded. The fact that these are persistent diseases in poverty is a distinct feature of them, and a distinct feature of the management of these conditions. And, a lot of it has to do with every country is different. I'm not about to recite a history of why every single country on earth has high levels of endemic infectious disease, but certainly, step back, the Monet version, looking at it from far away, is that some people have too damn much money and some people have too damn little.